what is up, AP Human Geography people? We're live here at my house at 7 o'clock on Thursday night, like we are every single Thursday night at 7 o'clock, to do some AP Human Geography review. So today what we're going to do is we're going to try to transition a little bit from agriculture, Unit 5, into Unit 6. And in particular, we're going to be looking at development today, okay? So if you're following the Rubenstein book, we're looking in chapter 10 of the 12th edition. I know it's chapter 9 in the 10th edition. I'm not sure what it is in the 11th. But most of us are using Rubenstein. That's what we're going to be doing today, is looking at really what are those development indicators and how in the world do we measure what development is. There actually is a way to do it, but there are many different things that go into helping us understand a developed country from a developing one. And there are a bunch of different ways to categorize that and classify it as well. So we're going to talk about all these things. Hi, Caitlin. Welcome back. Estuardo, Luke, Vikram. Good to see you guys. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to share my screen. Bam. Let me put my mic on my shirt so y'all can hear me better. And okay, I am screen sharing. Okay, here we go. So let's present. Hey, also don't forget, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to take a little bit of time to show you guys that FRQ we wrote last week. We're going to take the rubric from the College Board, and we're going to actually grade it with the rubric, the same rubric that they used at the AP Human Geography reading in 2009 whenever they graded that FRQ. So stay tuned for that. If you guys need to leave, I understand. But we're going to probably go till about 8:30 tonight. After the content, we're going to look at the FRQ. All right, so let's go ahead and get this show on the road. 5 live streams are free. A lot of you guys know this because a lot of you guys are showing up, every single week. Memberships will get you access to the stuff that we've done in the past. So if you guys want access to all the past reviews for the entire year, and you're getting ready to do that serious crunch time for the AP exam, which is not that far away, what, 8 weeks? Somewhere around 8 or 9 weeks away, then it's $25. Now, it went up $5, but it's going to go up to $35, according to my records here, by April the 1st. So keep in mind, if you guys want to get that a little bit cheaper, then go ahead and get it as soon as possible. And tell your friends if this is something that helps you guys. Let them know that's helpful, and hopefully they'll come here and get some help as well. How you doing, Noel? Noel or Noel? I've seen it pronounced either way. I actually just met a dude named Noel, and he spells it like Joel, except with So I'm guessing that's what you are, Noel Wilson. All right. So what is development? Really, our objectives are pretty simple today. We're going to look at all kinds of different ways that development is measured. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at the Human Development Index, which is kind of the big one you got to know. But there are a lot of other things that we can use to help us understand what countries are developed and which ones are not, and how all those things correlate. And then I'm going to show you guys Gapminder. I'm not sure if you've used that before, or if your teacher has used it, probably back in the population unit. They may have dabbled with it a little bit. So we're going to look at some different indicators together using Gapminder and see the correlation and the connection between the different various indicators that are shown in that data. And then we're going to talk a little bit at the end about the different sectors of the economy, because you can also measure development by looking at the kinds of jobs people have in a certain country. So that said, what is development? Well, I think that I got this definition from the AMSCO book. But development is going to be the process of improving the material conditions of people through diffusion of knowledge and technology. Okay, so we're looking at how well people are going to live within a country, or live within a region. You can look at development of a whole entire region like North America, or you can look at the development of a whole entire region like Southeast Asia. All right, more developed countries, or MDCs, as you'll see it written, okay, and hopefully this is a review for most of us, progressed further along this development continuum. All right, so when we talk about a continuum here, development is not something that, hey, we're the United States, we've achieved development, there's no further to develop. It's something that is ongoing, okay? The process of improving material conditions. As long as there can be improvement, there's going to be further development. And then less developed countries are going to be those that have not yet progressed, as far on this development continuum. And so you'll see, I think, MDC and LDC a lot. Most of the time, I can't speak for everyone. I know that I usually use the terms developed for MDCs and developing for LDCs. I think that sounds the best and kind of does the best job at demonstrating the implication that we mean when we say something is more or less developed. But when you use words like more or less, or whatever it is you want to use to distinguish those who are really well off today and those who are not, it starts to kind of imply that one group might be better than another, which sounds a little bit ethnocentric. It sounds a little bit almost like social Darwinism, which is something that, when people in the age of imperialism started to apply the idea of natural selection to why some people have a lot of stuff and success and military power and why others don't, then it starts to get a little bit not cool and even racist in some cases. And so when you use words like more and less, then some people feel a little bit butthurt about that. So developed and developing is probably a little bit more of a politically correct way of referring to it, and we see a lot of people referring to it in those ways. But there are other ways you can look at it as well. And this right here comes from the AMSCO book and shows all the different ways that people refer to developing or developed countries. And so just to kind of run through a little bit, and forgive me, I don't have the page number with me, and the book's back in the kitchen. I'm not going to go in there and get it. But this is in the Unit 6 section of the AMSCO Human Geography Review book. A lot of your teachers probably talk about how awesome it is. I definitely would recommend this one over many of the others. It's a great book. The only downside is that you have to get the test bank separate. So maybe a Princeton review would be good, just so you can have a test bank. But you got economic level, economic development, levels of industrialization, the Human Development Index, world systems theory, economic stages of economic growth. All right, these are all things we're going to talk about this week as well as next week when we look at economic interdependence. Okay, but the main thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the terminology here, like your developed and in developing countries, and we're also going to maybe look a little bit at, well, we're definitely going to look at the Human Development Index, and we'll kind of get along the edge of looking at the world systems theory today, and we're going to spend more time next week on that. But all these things are different ways of looking at the same concept, and that is which countries are more developed along that continuum and which ones are not. So why are there so many different ways to categorize countries by development? I wrote down here, part of the answer to this question is because there are so many factors that can be used to measure a developing country. Okay, many different indicators is sometimes what you'll hear them called, and many times, not always, there exist correlations between the two. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a little bit about the Human Development Index. I think that's where I'm going to start. It is actually a measure that is used by the United Nations to kind of, I guess, have a number, if you will, or a percentage that refers to how well off or how developed the country is compared to other countries. And so we call this the Human Development Index. All right, so HDI, you'll see it written down, in short, you'll see it written HDI. Make sure that you guys write that down. Know that the Human Development Index, HDI, is the same thing. But what you're going to do here is, or the way this is measured is, you've got different social and economic, I guess, social and economic factors that go into measuring human development. Okay, and it's going to look like this. You've got GNI, gross national income. Sometimes you'll see GDP used here because those two things are incredibly similar and can be used as a measure of how much value someone in the country is going to receive of the total income of your country. So when we look at GNI, the only difference between that and GDP is that GNI takes into account the money that might be made in other parts of the world, not just domestically within the country's borders. But either way, what you're looking at here is the overall income of a country. All right, so and we'll talk more about GNI in a minute, but when you look at the income of a country like the United States, or in other words, it's what it's able to produce, or the money and revenue it makes, it is $1 trillion economy. So when you look at numbers like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But when you divide that by the amount of people living in the country, then you start getting a number you can compare with other countries and other regions. Education is another one, okay? The expected years and average years of schooling are going to be measured into the social indicators of the Human Development Index. And then the last one, health, having to do with the life expectancy. All right, so you can imagine just looking at these different indicators that there are going to be some connections between those three things. I bet, and you probably already know this, that if the GNI is really high, education levels are going to be really high too. And if GNI and education is really high, surely these people are living healthy and long lives. Well, you'd be probably right that most of the time there's going to be strong correlations between not only these different, indicators, but also many others. Here's a graphic that does a pretty good job at showing you what I just said. When you look at Human Development Index, you're looking at health, education, and living standards, more or less. Sometimes you will see it called health, education, social, or I guess social and economic. Sometimes it's social and economic indicators, and they would consider both health and education to be a social indicator. But these are those things, all right? Life expectancy, average mean and average mean the same, and expected years of schooling, all right? And then your gross national income. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say it, but if y'all have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to put it down there in the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen, and I will definitely take time out of this review and talk about that. So any questions y'all have, hit me up. All right, if you make a lot of money, you live a long life, right? And you also have a good education. We just made this point. Does that mean that you're well off? Well, usually I'd say it does, right? At least compared to people who don't have any money. And if you live in a society with no money and education is really low, then there's not a whole lot of opportunity for growth, both for individual and familial growth, as well as for your society as a whole. And so if you have one of these indicators, the odds are pretty good that you have a lot more of the others as well. So education, here's the connection here. Education means innovation. When we talk about innovation, this is the way that you take something you have and make it better, right? So this leads to better technology, better medicine, more equality and social order, more laws, more safety, more money, and many other things you can put in there. High incomes means that there are going to be purchases or people are going to be able to purchase services. Right now, we'll talk more about that a little bit towards the end of this presentation. But services are going to be things that people do for one another. All right, it's not something you can hold in your hand. Right now, I am actually providing a service literally right now. You can't take this review lecture and hold it in your hands. Right? It's not a tangible item, but it is something you can benefit greatly from. And so things like food services, doctors, politics, science, teachers, any of these things, they are people who are providing a service to you. And if you have high income, you can afford the very best and usually will benefit greatly from that. And then you've also got longer life, better food, better insurance programs for the aging, better living conditions, as well as access to medical care means people are going to live longer. They can't have any of that stuff if they don't have high income. They don't have high income if they're not smart enough to be able to find out opportunities that exist. And all these things are connected. That's the point I'm trying to make. This right here is a map that shows the countries with the highest levels of on the Human Development Index. Now, keep in mind, I should have said this in my PowerPoint, but Human Development Index is measured between 0 and 1. But there is no country on Earth that is going to be at 0, and there's no country at Earth that's going to be at 1, because that would mean 100%. And I mean, you know, we might be pretty developed in countries like the United States, but we're not going to be 100%. We'll be somewhere in the 9 point something. Okay. And actually, if you look at the Rubenstein book in chapter 10, key issue 2, I believe is what it is in the 12th edition, it actually will walk you through individual regions and look at their overall HDI. So definitely read that if you haven't already done it. But notice that you're gonna see this pattern a lot. But you've got all this dark green in North America and Europe, and also Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. Well, what do you think that means? Well, My guess would be the darker the green, the higher the levels of development, and that would absolutely be correct, right? So on this map here, the darker the green, the better, I guess, the higher the levels of development. All those countries are going to be in the like 9.2, 9.5 range, sometimes a little even higher than that. And then if you get to light green, you have, countries that are not really super poor, but they're also not like United States rich. And then obviously you've got your red and yellow regions, which we look at this and we say, okay, well, Africa. We lump Africa all together as one big place, almost like this is a country. We're going to Africa, right? We're in Africa, you're going, Africa. The point I'm trying to make is that we usually look at this whole region as just a place that is just really struggling economically. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of ethnic conflicts and things like this. All of this kind of factors into the development levels that you're looking at. But more or less, the indicators that follow, I guess, your education, your health. These places have some of the lowest life expectancies on Earth. They have very small amount of people going to school for 10 or more years. Many of the women don't go to school at all. They have kids whenever they're 12, 13, 14 years old and get married off, and that's part of the reason why you've got high fertility rates and as well as the some of the economic problems. One of the number one things you want to do if you want your country to be a better place and to develop more quickly and you bring women up, right? You make it so that women can also have opportunities, and that's going to lead to huge opportunity for the country as a whole. But these are some of the most unequal, undeveloped places on Earth. And also you've got some of this in South Asia as well. This right here is Afghanistan, the landlocked, the poorest country in Asia right here. All right. Even in parts of rural India, India is like almost two worlds. You got your urban India where things are a little bit more like what we more I guess associated with the urban setting, and then you've got your rural India where there's a lot of just traditional mindsets that are centered on arranged marriages and things of that sort. I notice I've got some questions down here. Let's take a look. Number one, are teachers in the tertiary sector then? Absolutely. We're going to actually look specifically at that. And we're gonna break that down into not only tertiary but also quaternary and quinary towards the end of this presentation. Yes, that's true. What is America? What is considered a good salary to have in America? We're gonna look at the GNI in a minute. Now, to be clear, when we talk about gross national income, I think that might be next on my list actually. No, let me go to it real quick. All right, so this here is GDP. It's going to be very similar to and if you look, America is very, this is a cartogram. America is big because the 2009, so this is really old actually, but 2009 GDP in the United States, which is kind of like GNI, was more than 40,000. That is not an average income, but it is kind of used in that way, more or less. Remember, when I said the GDP is the income of the country as a whole, that's exactly what it is. And so the country is, our economy is what, somewhere around $12 trillion, some ungodly amount of money. But when you divide that number by all the people living in the country, which is somewhere around 325,000 people, then it equals, actually it's going to be somewhere around 50,000. I just did it the other day. I think I've got it in this presentation later on. So it's more than 40,000. Is that a good income? Depends on what kind of lifestyle. For an average income, that's great. For an income where you want to live a little bit better, I guess upper middle class, I don't know. That would be less than I'd want to make. But remember, we're looking at more or less how far does the economy go per person. That word per capita we're going to talk about. So I'd say, to answer your question more directly, just my opinion, 50 to, honest to God, 50 to 70,000 is plenty enough for if you know how to budget and watch your income. But it really just depends on what your goals are. I don't make that much. I'm the breadwinner of my family. My wife doesn't even work, and I'm a teacher, and I do a bunch of side stuff like this and teaching virtual classes, and we're okay. So I guess it depends on whatever you want, your personal goals. So here we go. I hope I answered that question correctly. Okay, so let's go back a couple of slides. Go back. This right here is a list of a relatively current list, 2018 rankings of the Human Development Index for your most developed countries on Earth. Notice you got Norway, Switzerland, Australia, excuse me. Norway and Switzerland are in Europe. Australia is Australia. Most of these are going to be European, or you got the United States is number 13. But look at the Human Development Index is not low by any stretch. 0.924 compared to Norway, which is the most developed country on Earth according to HDI, which is 0.95. So there's not enough difference between the development levels of any of these countries for it to matter. There just isn't. And also look at some of your outliers here. Hong Kong, it's one of the Asian tigers. We're going to spend some time looking at that later on. It is part of China. China will definitely continually say that, hey, this is our possession, and anytime we want to, we can take control of that area. But it really is more like a city-state. They have autonomy. They govern themselves. They are democratic, and they're very, very well off because of their international trade model. Singapore is kind of in the same scenario, as well as, well, I guess those are the only two that are on this particular list. Germany has the best economy in Europe if you're looking at breaking it down by country, not looking at the, European Union as a whole. So these are really well-off countries. When you take the amount of money those countries make on the whole and divide it by the population, you get high GNI, just like what we looked at earlier, or GDP. So basically, what is the difference between GDP and GNI? Not to spend too much time on this, because honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the spatial perspective, right? I say that all the time. But the main difference here is that GDP looks at how much money is made within the country. GNI accounts for what is also made internationally that comes back to that country. So the difference is not going to be big enough to count. And it's still going to be a number that goes to show the overall wealth divided by the population of a country, and give you kind of a measurable snapshot of how well people are based on how much money they're able to make. And I say make like it's an average income. It's not. It's how far does the economy go per person. And this, this word per capita, you might see that when you're looking through some of your maps in the Rubenstein book. All that means is per head or per person. Okay, so when you look at GNI per capita, it simply means per person. Now, there's another one too that I didn't put on here that is PPP, Purchasing Power Parity. And what that does is, in order to make everything, I was just watching the news today, and they're talking about how strong the U.S. dollar is. The U.S. dollar might be worth more than other currencies. What purchasing power parity does is it takes into account these differences and kind of makes it all on one currency, more or less. So when you're looking at China's GDP per capita with purchasing power parity, you would be looking at it in terms of the same dollar value as the United States. That's so we make sure we're comparing apples to apples. I should have put that in here. I didn't. There it is right there. So if you look at the United States GNI, the gross national income, it's higher than I said it was. $19.61 trillion. Y'all, I could pay my student loans off with that. Holy crap. I would love to have a little bit of that. But this here's the value of our overall economy. Now, this is the number of people in the country, about 325 million. 325 million people, and all of this is per 2017 statistics. When you divide this number by this number, then you're going to get roughly $60,200, and that right there would be our GNI per capita with purchasing power parity. I have a question. Let's take a look. What is the most powerful country or currency? Excuse me. Dude, I have no idea. Honestly, God, I do not know what would be the most valuable is what I'm guessing you're looking at. Now, if you look at power and you look at the I'm not honestly sure how to answer that. I'd say there's a lot of power in the United States when you factor in how much our GNI is, but I don't know how to answer the question about how powerful our currency would be compared to something else without looking at the fact that right now I know that our dollar is really, really strong, but that's not necessarily a good thing, because the article that it wasn't an article, it was the news. The story I was listening to was how some manufacturing plants were having to close down because it costs less right now due to how strong our dollar is. It costs less for people to go and get the same materials from other countries, and so that's causing there to be different types of industries shut down. I can't remember particularly what industry it was. I was kind of working and doing something else at the same time, but so there is definitely some good with that, but there's also some bad as well. So it's hard to answer that question outright. All right, so let's move on. All right, so per capita means, or I guess, makes it comparable to other countries and regions. So if you look at China, holy mess, China, the strongest economy in the world. Oh my gosh, $23.24 trillion in 2017. Instant replay, ladies and gentlemen. The United States is not that high. We don't have. What do you mean to tell me our economy is worse than China? Oh my gosh, what's happening? Somebody call Donald Trump. No, here's what's happening. Dude, they got like a billion point 4 people, right? So when you divide this number by 1.4 billion, that right there is going to be their GNI per capita. So if you look at just the GNI, the overall income of a country, China's got the United States beat. But when you look at how people live because of how far that wealth goes per person, then the United States has a far higher GNI per person than China does. So that right there is the reason why we break it down per capita. It's because it makes the dollar amount, I guess, the overall income of a country comparable to the overall income of other countries based on how people live. All right, so the other one, we're still looking at HDI, life expectancy. How long can we expect to live on average based on current trends? Notice again, the United States and Canada and Europe and Australia, we're going to be really, really high on that list because, I mean, we're doing pretty well off. People tend to live longer in these countries. Now, you've got some other countries in places like South America and even North Africa, China. These places have higher life expectancies. So you're not going to see a complete correlation with GNI, but you still see that clearly the countries that have the highest GNI also have the highest life expectancies. All right. Average years of education. Well, look at this. The United States, Europe, Russia, Australia, South Africa. Kind of looks like that, doesn't it? Kind of looks like the other map we looked at with GNI. So yes, there are definitely correlations. If you're wealthy, if you live a long time, you probably have a lot of average years of education as well. There are so many different ways to measure development. Here's another one. Here comes from the Rubenstein book. You've got milk production. It says million metric tons. Some of the places that produce the most milk are going to be your most developed countries. Well, we spent a lot of time last week looking at the operation, I guess, the things that go into a dairy farm. There is a lot of mechanization. There is a lot of computers and people got to be able to transport it. There's a lot of mechanization in the process, and so it makes sense that places that are going to be able to produce the most milk are going to be places that are higher on their levels of development. India is a outlier here because, I mean, tons of people, tons of cows. Makes sense they would have a lot of dairy. Literacy rate. How many people in a country are able to read? In a country like the United States and Europe, I mean, we're 99%. Even North Korea is 99%. Everyone in these countries, this is basically the same set of countries, are able to read. You've got your more, I guess, less poor but not quite U.S. rich countries like Central and South America, like parts of Southern and Europe and the Middle East, where you've got high literacy rates but not close to 100% necessarily. And there are some outliers, but more or less the data correlates with the same group of countries as with the other indicators we're looking at. Consumer goods, looking at motor vehicles. The people that have the most cars live in, you guessed it, the United States, Europe, Australia, Saudi Arabia. That's kind of ironic to me. At the time that this map was done in the Rubenstein book, women couldn't even drive in Saudi Arabia. That is very, very new and even kind of controversial among your conservatives in that country. Consumer goods, we're looking at cell phones. Now, I imagine that this right here is it's gotta be different today. I know at one time, y'all, when I was teaching this class, I literally had 3 phones myself. Now, part of that is because I just used them for different purposes. And today I've got a phone that's decent enough that I can put my actual phone and also my office phone on the same phone. And so I went down to just having 1 phone. I know makes me sound really old. But the places where you've got cellular phones per 1,000 people, and even the United States, look at this. This is 1,000 to 1,500. What that means is that for every 1,000 people, you're going to have 1,000 or more phones. Some people in some of these countries that are most developed have more than just 1 phone, is the point that I'm trying to make here. Now, there are, again, some outliers. In Brazil, they have more phones, apparently, than North America. In Europe, they have the most phones. And there's a few others as well. Plane traffic. Wow. How in the world does plane traffic measure development? I put this one up on a quiz a few years ago, and my students were like, oh, but look at where the planes are going. You look at plane traffic, and all the different traffic areas are going basically to Europe, North America, to in particularly the eastern side of China or Japan or parts of Australia. But mostly this right here is your area where most people are traveling, and it's not nearly as often down here south of the equator, is it? Well, you can look at this and tell, well, people are trying to go to the most developed countries on Earth for a whole slew of different reasons. It could be because Europe is one of the biggest tourist destinations because of all the museums and all these, the history and all that. But, it's a developed region. What do we have here? Global gaming revenues. Everyone likes a good video game, right? Well, the places that are going to make the most money on gaming is going to be places where people can afford to do it more and have access to things like internet and things like, Xbox or PC or PlayStation, whatever it might be. So most of the people playing Fortnite today are going to be in the most developing places, or I guess the most developed places on Earth. Not so much in places, again, south of the equator. So you guys surely are starting to see this geographic and spatial trend when we look at development. Gender Inequality Index. This is another big, this is definitely one you want to write down, all right? Because when you look at gender inequality, no country on Earth today has it so that women are 100%, at least statistically on paper, equal to men. Now, we would say in our country that women are pretty dang equal. I mean, a lot of women probably say, well, I don't feel like I'm inferior to men, but yet you also see where women are treated differently in the workforce under some conditions. I don't really see that in my own perspective, but just today on the news we have a very prominent congresswoman who was a I want to say the first combat pilot in the Air Force coming out and saying that she was sexually assaulted, and no one would help her do anything about it. So you got things like that, and then you've also got things like the wage gap. When you talk about how women make 77 cents to the dollar compared to men, there's a bunch of reasons for that. So you can't just take that number and go with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that no country on Earth today can you look on paper and see statistically that women are equal to men. So let's measure it out. The places that you've got the highest level of gender equality is going to be your northern countries. Okay, the places where you see the highest level of inequality is going to be your poorest developing regions like sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Central America, the Middle East, South Asia. It's the same exact countries as what we were just now looking at. Now, keep in mind that this measure is called the Gender Inequality Index. It is measuring inequality. So the higher the number is, the more inequality there exists. The lower the number is, the less inequality exists, meaning that women are more equal. So don't get mixed up and don't get confused. The lower the number, the better off women are in the country. The Gender-Related Development Index is based on female income compared to men, numbers of females enrolled in school compared to men, percentage of literate females compared to men, and life expectancy. So it's the same exact indicators as the HDI, except what you're doing is you're looking at women compared to men. I hope I've got a map for this. I do. GDI. So instead of HDI, the Gender Development Index is called GDI, and here it is. So here are countries where based on these measures we just now looked at, okay, these are countries where women are going to be most equal in terms of their the Human Development Index. If you look down here in some of your poor countries, again, women are not seen on equal footing as men, and they suffer for it. Man, they suffer for it. Could you imagine being in high school, being your age right now, and being married off to some old guy in order to fix a family feud? Well, that happens all the time in places like India and also places outside of India. Afghanistan, you see a lot of that too. We'll look at that later. Gender empowerment measure: per capita female income compared to per capita male income, percentage of professional and technical jobs held by women, right? Percentage of administrative jobs held by women, and percentage of member of parliament. So, in other words, you're looking at, do we have nothing but men in these power positions, or do we have some women as well? That's what the gender empowerment measure is. And look at this, 0.6. And remember, this is between this is between 0 and 1. So 0.6 and above, I mean, if the United States is 0.6 on the gender empowerment measure, are we even doing it right? Because that's huge, that's almost 50%, right? So we're looking, women aren't doing so well in some of these countries that are even in the dark red. I would imagine that the United States would be lower on the gender empowerment measure than some European countries. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to go with that. All right, what I want to do right now is, hopefully it's going to work for me. I'm going to open the link in a new tab. I guess I need to close this out. I want to actually look at Gapminder. Have you guys ever seen this before? Maybe your teacher has used it in class. I have a question. No, Estwater, you are in for a treat. Can you define gender empowerment? Yes. Gender empowerment is, well, let me go back to figure out what I did here. Where did my PowerPoint go? Oh, give me a sec. I'm having struggles. Just have to pull it up separately. Oh, I see. All right. There, I was like, where's my PowerPoint? I was on the wrong tab. All right. So, just like we had mentioned just a second ago, when you're looking at the gender empowerment measure, when we look at empowerment, we're talking about like really like power. Okay. So, oh, you can only see me. I stopped sharing. Sorry. I'm on the struggle bus today, guys. Here we go. So you guys can hopefully y'all can see it now. There we go. So I'll just put this up real quick so I can answer this question. Your empowerment is going to be measured based on these things here compared to men. Now, when you look at these, you've heard the statement that power is money, right? Well, if you measure power by the amount of money people make, and you compare women's money, I guess their income compared to men, then there is a measure of women's power, right? percentage of professional and technical jobs. So in other words, if you are, how many women are professors? How many women are going to be congresswomen? Or how many women are going to be CEOs of companies like Facebook or whatever it might be? How many Fortune 500 CEOs are going to be women? What's the percentage of women in parliament? These are all things that the more women there are in these positions, the more empowered they're going to be, because they're going to have women who are advocates for them and women who are able to really influence the economy and the politics of a particular country. So when we look at empowerment or gender empowerment, that's more or less what we're looking at right there. Does that clarify a little bit, I hope? And my question, I'm not sure if I... Okay, so I definitely just answered this. So if you go back into the, I had struggles, but if you go back a few minutes, you'll see the answer to that one. What is gender-related development? This right here was the one we were just now looking at before the gender empowerment. That's measured by comparing the same indicators as HDI. All right, so gender-related development index is you're taking the same things as the HDI, such as the amount of income, such as the amount of school that women are going to have. Or remember, the HDI looked at the average years of school, and also the expected years. Well, in this case, you're also looking at the literacy rates of female compared to men, because in some of your more developed, I guess, developing regions, a lot of women can't read. They're not expected to. And then you're also looking at life expectancy. So it takes really the same indicators, with the exception of the literacy rate, and compares females to males as what you see with the HDI. It's just a comparison of those indicators between men and women, rather than looking at it on the whole like the HDI does. All right. Nicole, I love Gapminder too. It is cool, especially when you want to be able to see how these different indicators pan out, I guess, and correlate with one another. So what I'm going to do here is I just went to gapminder.org. If you ever want to play around with this, which I highly encourage you to do it, if you Google Gapminder, you'll come up to this, and then here's the home screen. Hit Tools. And now, once you get to Tools, it's going to pull up this awesome chart, and it's going to be set to default with bubbles. And you guys may or may not know Hans Rosling. Y'all might have studied Hans Rosling or seen some of his work, his Don't Panic documentary back in the population unit. The dude used a lot of these graphics to explain development, and also to explain, I guess, population trends, why we shouldn't be so concerned. He was more of an optimistic approach to population growth, as opposed to someone like a neo-Malthusian who would say, like, all doom and gloom. We're going to kill ourselves by having too many kids. We can't feed, and this, that, and the other. But Rosling used these graphics to explain his point of view, and that's what we're going to do here. So notice already you've got life expectancy on the y-axis, and you've got income on the x-axis. And we've just looked at these indicators. They are both indicators of the Human Development Index. Well, what trends do you notice here about life expectancy and income? Now, notice that the best we're going to do, honestly, we're not living to be that much older than 90 years old. So you got to assume that most people, no matter what development level you're looking at, is going to be, 80 to 90, 70, somewhere in this ballpark area. My grandmother lived to be she lived to be almost 90. The average life expectancy for women in our country is about 80 or 81 or something like that. The average life expectancy for men is somewhere around 72 or 70. So this here is the United States span, just to go on our average. 50 is extremely young to die, right? But and so is 60 and even under 70. What do you notice about all the countries in blue, y'all? What region are we looking at? Do I see this? The places with the lowest level of development, generally speaking, have low life expectancies. And they also make very little money. So you've got a few over here that the money is pretty good. All right. So I say it's pretty good. It's pretty good compared to the rest of them. 10,000 K or 10,000. I'm guessing that's GDP. There you go, GDP per capita. That's really not as much when you look at countries like the United States, where our GDP per capita is 54,000. You see the difference here? So the lower the income, the lower the life expectancy. You can also hit this little button. It's going to show you a time frame that, and honestly, that's way too far back. So we'll just kind of pull it and speed it up a little bit. Maybe from maybe 1930s. My grandmother was born in 1926. Let's go from here and see what happens with life expectancies and money. I hope this is showing up right for you guys. But as more money is made by, I guess, the economy as a whole, and you can divide that up, and there's a higher GDP per capita, the longer people live. And the thing that Hans Rosling would really want you to see is this later trend where even places in South and East Asia start to go really high. This is India. Okay, so you've noticed just now in the last maybe 20 or 30 years or so, India's life expectancy has gone up, as has their income. They're getting there, right? So this is what Hans Rosling would have wanted you to see. Let's look at a few other indicators, because I understand that we've been here for a while. Babies per woman. All right, so anybody remember what we call that? What's that measure called when you look at babies per woman? There you go. Stuardo's got me. It's the fertility rate. Sometimes you'll see it called TFR, or total fertility rate. Watch this. Again, let me kind of start this here because I don't want to wait that long. But all right, so look at this. What you're looking at is still we've still on the income. So, and here are the amount of babies per woman, 6 to 8. A lot of the world is in this 6 to 8 range. That's crazy. But and we're in 1930-ish. Watch this. As more people make more money, what starts happening to the total fertility rates? Geez Louise, I'm guessing that's China we're looking at there. Now, see how the statistics correlate with one another? So the places today that have the lowest total fertility rates, even too low for I guess to replenish your population, are going to be some of the places with the highest amount of money being made. The United Arab Emirates is a very rich country, and the Middle East, Singapore, we just looked at that. It's like the 4th or 5th most developed country according to the HDI. I don't know if your teacher is like me and shows y'all the what is it called, the National Day video on YouTube where it talks about going off and doing some baby making. But Singapore is literally giving incentives, like many other countries, to get people on board with making babies, because otherwise they're not going to have anyone left to stimulate their economy in several decades. And there are other countries like that as well. Luxembourg, what's this? Germany. Germany's total fertility rate is low. Japan here is a case study, man. These guys are trying to bring in like robots and stuff, and nobody's having kids. I want to say that the most recent quarter in Japan had some of the lowest fertility rates ever recorded. They're slated to lose like 50 million people in their population in in a few decades. So again, let's look at another one here. Let's look at another one here, and then I'm going to have to probably move on because I'm running out of time. I wish I had more time. But let's see that I'm looking at education, all right? And we want to look at you can see gender equality here too. Let's look at school costs, expenditure per kids, and no, let's not look at that. Let's look at literacy. Let me keep it simple. I'll let you guys go ahead and play. By the way, well, no, you know what? We're all going to do it. We're going to look at expenditure per student in primary school. This is going to be elementary school. Okay. Let's see what happens. Now, I think what we're looking at is expenditure per student in primary. I think that well, let's take a look. Let's hit play. Well, that didn't do as well as I wanted to do. The more money you make, the more money can be spent on kids. On the other hand, if you're living in a country that you don't make a lot of money, the cost, I guess, the percentage you're going to spend on education relative to your income may be higher as well, which is part of the reason why a lot of people don't have access. So there are other things. Let's look at literacy rate, and then we'll be done with it. So we'll say literate adult. We'll look at adult females. Okay, so the amount of adult females that can read, and also the income. And you guys can come here and play later on when we have more time. The higher the income, the more women are going to be reading. The connection here is that you can't really get past a certain point in your economic productivity if you don't have educated women, because I mean, look at how much women play into our economy. So Nick, I appreciate it. I feel like I wish I had more time, that I could spend more time looking at this with you guys. Definitely, if you don't do anything else after this review, go to Gapminder and play with these numbers and see how they connect to one another. And if you have any questions about why is one country here and one country there, research it, man. Learn this stuff. Ask your teacher about it. But let's go ahead and finish out the slide, and then I want to spend the last 30 minutes, maybe not. Might not take that long, looking at how you grade the FRQ that we wrote last week together about the dairy farms and the organic farms. Okay, so let's go. Gender empowerment measure, just did that. There's Gapminder. Okay, we were here. Last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. So we should be able to get through this in about 10 minutes. You can look at and kind of tell a country's development based on the economic activities that are going on in that country. So generally speaking, and I guess simplistically, we break it down into 3 different economic sectors, and that is your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary. Now, we spent a lot of time looking at primary, and if you look at the course articulation, I think this stuff is mentioned under agriculture, but I knew I was going to cover it right here because it makes more sense in the context we're looking at. So when we look at primary economic activities, y'all, we are looking at anything that is extracted from the earth. Okay, so we just got done with Unit 5. We were looking at agriculture and livestock and all that good stuff. That is primary economic activities. So anything that's taken out of the earth, such as a crop, such as livestock, such as mining, right? Mining, fishing, hunting, anything that is taken straight from the earth directly, we're looking at primary economic activities. This right here is what it might look like today. These people are cutting down trees to build with. These dudes are doing agriculture. You got fishing, you've got mining, the whole shebang, right? Secondary economic activities are manufacturing. So when you look at primary, these are going to be largely raw material type stuff. But secondary doesn't happen until after Industrial Revolution. So we haven't looked at industries just yet. We're going to get to that in a couple weeks. But secondary is going to be anything having to do with manufacturing. And this is some pretty sophisticated manufacturing. I'm not sure what they're making. It looks way too techy for me. But anything where you take something and make it into a manufactured finished product, that's going to be part of the secondary economic activities. Textiles, iron, food processing, making cars, you name it. Tertiary economic activities are going to be anything that, and we just mentioned this earlier, anything that involves doing something for someone. All right, so it's not something you can hold, touch, and feel, but it is a service you get from someone, like getting your hair cut, or me giving you guys a review on this topic in human geography. So you got flight attendants, teachers, Publix bag boys. I'm not sure if you guys have Publix where you're at, but man, I tell you, those guys, they really want to take your buggy out and help you. I'm like, dude, I'm a young man. I can handle my own groceries. You got doctors. Any of these things are providing a service. But notice that there is a lot of difference between the type of service that you're getting from a server, like a restaurant waitress or waiter or whatever it might be, or what you're getting from a teacher or a doctor. Okay, so the service is going to be different. There's going to be a level of specialty that you're going to get from people that are maybe highly qualified in whatever it is they're trying to provide. Publix is better than Walmart. Yeah, you know what? I give you that. Walmart is cheaper than Publix. Booyah! I feel you though. I do love me some Publix. and love me some Walmart too. Yep, very much so. So they get a lot. I'm not gonna lie, Walmart probably gets a little bit more of my business just because of that right there. You know, poor teacher probs. But look at this. Tertiary can be broken down into several other categories, and that's because there is such a wide range of the kinds of services you can get and the kinds of services that are provided. And they, Sinclair, I'm with you there too. I'd say Kroger gets more than either one of the other two from me. We have a Kroger right down the road. Man, they were the first with a U-scan, and so that's where I go. Now everyone's got a U-scan though, so but Kroger still gets me. It is my favorite. So look at this, tertiary. When you break it down into subsections, all right. So remember, we already looked at your primary, secondary, tertiary. So what we looked at now is just services. It can be also divided into quaternary and quinary. So let me explain. Tertiary in this context would be something that is, you know, you're a high school, you work at a fast food restaurant, you're providing a service, right? You don't have to have a degree or anything for that. Even being a barber or a hairstylist, I would put under tertiary. And you do need some level of training for that, right? But it still would be more of a service that that would fit under a regular tertiary sector. And the reason is because when you start looking at quaternary, some people call this the knowledge sector. In other words, you need high degrees, high levels of qualification. People like teachers, people like college professors, doctors, CEOs, different types of administrators. They're going to be under this quaternary sector. So the best way to really think about that is if you have a master's degree or a doctorate or some kind of advanced technical education or something like that, you're going to be in the quaternary sector. And then you've got quinary, all right? And quinary is going to be your decision makers. You've got people like members of Congress. You've got people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, CEOs of large countries. These are people who their everyday decisions are going to impact millions upon millions of people. Their services that they're providing are going to be in the quinary sector. So quinary and quaternary are all parts of the service sector, but you kind of break them down into different categories in order for you to get a grasp on what kind of service is being provided. Does that make sense? Now, one more thing I wanted to point out is that sometimes, and really this right here is the explanation that I always went with my students. I think the AMSCO book uses this exact same explanation in terms of what quaternary and quinary is, but be warned that there are different explanations that put these things in different categories. And I'm going to tell you, like I tell you all the time, it's not about where teachers or politicians fall on the different categories. It is about the why of where. Yes. I have a question. Let's take a look. Would lawyers fall under tertiary? Estuardo, lawyers would fall under, they would be quaternary. As far as I would classify them, I would put them as quaternary. But if you're just looking at them in relation to something like primary and secondary, then yeah. But quaternary is where lawyers would be. Absolutely. Yeah, you need lots of law school and education. Yes, you do. Very much so. And that stuff starts to rack up. I have a buddy of mine who went to teaching at the same time as I did, and then he taught for 1 year and then went into law school. And he makes more than me, but he also has a lot more student loans than I do. So, and that's not good because I have a ton. All right, so if you look at development and you tie in the type of jobs being done in a country to that development, you notice a trend here, okay? And this right here is going to be in the United States of America. Look at the service sector of our economy. 77% of people working in the United States are doing some kind of a service. That equates to whatever those numbers are over there. But the main thing I'm looking at here is the pie chart with the percentages. Notice that your primary, your agriculture, and your anything else that would be, we're going to just look at agriculture for now because there's not a whole lot of mining and things like that in here. You've got less than 2% of our country doing something that would be considered a primary economic activity. Wow. And you think about, well, we have enough food to eat, right? I mean, you got the breadbasket of the United States right there in the area where we're producing all this wheat. That goes to show that how much of an impact technology has had on things like agriculture. We don't need a ton of people to farm, because people with their machines and their sophisticated technology and all their I guess production ability, they make enough food for the majority of people, but it's less than 2% of the population. Construction would be, and manufacturing, construction and manufacturing would be secondary. And then government is quaternary. It's actually a form of service which would be added to the services. The point here that I'm trying to make is that, wow, rich countries, they offer a lot of services, don't they? Compare that to Brazil, which is kind of in the middle, and Nepal, which is extremely poor. 81% of people in Nepal, which is a country just along the Himalayan mountains north of India, is going to be doing agriculture. These guys are peasant farmers, y'all. That's crazy. I have a question. Is providing medical supplies count as a service? Yes. Yes, the provision of medical supplies. For example, I've got well, yes, I believe it would be. Now, if you're working at a factory where you're manufacturing those medical supplies, then I would consider that to be more secondary. But yes. All right, so I'm almost done with the content. We're going to look at the FRQ. But one thing I wanted to point out here that I didn't say earlier is that Brazil, it's not really a developing country. It's not really a developed country. There's a lot of difference between Brazil and the United States. There is a lot of difference between Brazil and Nepal. How do you classify a country? If you're looking at just developed and developing, how do you classify a country like Brazil? Well, you see the word NIC, or newly industrialized country. That is used a lot, all right, to refer to a country that is like Brazil. I can't believe I didn't even think to put this in here, but we already learned about the the demographic transition model, right? Remember talking about stage 3 in the demographic transition model, where birth rates start to go down as opportunities begin to increase. That is where Brazil would be. That's where Mexico would be. That's where India would be. All these countries would be examples of NICs, and they would be stage 3 countries on the demographic transition. And so you would see that there is going to be declining birth rates and increasing opportunity as more income comes, more education comes as well, higher life expectancies come. So yeah, Brazil, India, Mexico, they're all going to be examples of NICs, or something that would become kind of in the center between an LDC and an MDC. I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. That's also in the AMSCO book if you guys get a chance to look at that. Here is the Eurozone. So you're looking at the European Union. Again, agriculture is a freakishly small part of that. Industry is a little bit higher. Services, the vast majority of people are going to be in some kind of a service sector economic activity. So that brings me to my resources. Actually, there is a video on HDI that I meant to put in here, and for some reason I was looking up a video about the Millennial Development Goals. Next week, I'll make sure I'll put the HDI video in there as well. But there's plenty. I think the one I looked at was about Australia's HDI, but it does a really good job at summarizing the Human Development Index on YouTube. Gapminder is the most potent resource I'm going to give you this week, so I would definitely play with that. And this article here is really cool because it goes into the ways that we go about categorizing development. Third world doesn't refer to developing countries. It was a Cold War term, right? So if you guys want a little bit more information about the importance of naming developing and developed countries, I would highly recommend you read that. It's a pretty good read. So in summary, we talked about HDI. We looked at the different indicators that are part of that measure of development. We looked at how many different indicators, from the amount of people who play video games to traffic between countries on airways, are going to all be examples of a country's development. Gapminder is an awesome tool for comparing these things. Tertiary economic activities are going to be most available in developed countries, and primary is mostly done in some of the poorest countries on earth today. And NICs, I finished up with that. NICs are countries with a large secondary manufacturing sector. They're kind of right in the middle between developed and developing. They're almost there. Maybe they're almost there, or at least they're closer along that continuum. All right. Any questions before I turn over and look at the FRQ from last week? And if you didn't do that FRQ with me, I still highly recommend that you stay for this because it will be helpful. Let me grab something to drink real quick. All right, so let's do it. So I'm done with the content portion. If you have not done a lot of FRQ practice, what I'm about to show you is one of the most important things that you can do with any FRQ you write. Let me go ahead and pull. I'm gonna give me just a second. Let me figure out how I gotta do this. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this over here. All right, I'm going to share. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna share screen 1. Okay. So you guys should be able to see my OneNote now, correct? Let's take one more sip. Y'all have me talking a lot today. All right. So a few things that you guys need to be doing at this point is you really need to be writing FRQs. And when you write an FRQ, I actually was just in a classroom a couple of days ago, and I was talking to a group about FRQs. And one of the things I would really encourage you to do is when you're reading over these, or when you're completing FRQ, try to do it without researching it, even if you have no idea. And the reason why I say that is because on the day of the AP exam, you have to understand that when you open up that test booklet, there is going to be 3 questions on there that everyone in the country is answering at the same time. And you may look at it and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what they're asking me. And the reason why I'm telling you this is not to freak you out or anything, but to tell you that in actuality, if you really take the time to read, you might not know 100% of what the answer should be, but you dang well can score points just by thinking spatially and just by thinking about the vocabulary to use. So I didn't say this very much last time, but vocabulary is incredibly important because you want to be able to apply it to the FRQ and know what they're talking about. I can't really see that great of an example on this particular question, but maybe that's not as good. But you never know when vocabulary is gonna sneak into an FRQ that you need to be able to understand. That's going to be the game changer, whether or not you can get some points or not. All right. One thing I did not show you last week as well is the idea of outlining. We should have taken a little bit of time to do this. You may be someone that wants to take the first 5 minutes of your FRQ to write a quick outline. And if you do, don't spend more than 5 or so minutes doing this because you only have 25 minutes to write the question. But sometimes kind of jotting down your ideas can show you in advance where you're going to try to score the points on the FRQ. And if you remember, this particular question asks for an identification and explanation of 2 factors that lead to the decline of dairy farms, and then the same thing about the increase of organic farms. So you have to return it to that. So the first thing I would do if I were you is underline, identify, and explain like we did. And also take the time to realize you need to give 2 examples. So you definitely want to actually mark on your question like I've done here. That's a good habit to make because it'll help you to know here is what I'm doing, and it will give you clarity when you start to write the response. For the outline here, and I only did example A because I put this together really fast while I was trying to eat. But I wrote out just a quick outline of where I'm going with this. And if you look at factor here, I wrote down my 2 factors. I wrote down oversupply and machines because that's what I put over here when I answered the question. So that's where I was going with my 2 identifications. And then for the explanation, I just wrote some bullet points. No profits equal shutdown. Rich farms get bigger, and because there's more efficiency, less farms are going to go out of business. And then right here, I put small farms can't keep up with production. All right. Notice I also wrote a note telling me to explain how, and I wrote a note here telling me to make sure that I relate this to the decline of dairy farms, or in this case, relate it to the increase of organic farms. If you don't make that connection, then you are running the risk of not getting points for something you already know. So you have to make sure that you pay very close attention to the question, and outlining can be a good way to help make sure that you know in your mind that you're going to get points for what you put. All right, so what I want to do now is show you guys the scoring guidelines for this particular question. When you are a reader for the AP exam, and I did this last year, you will have the rubric to the question in front of you. And you are required actually to have it on a stand so you can see it at all times while you're grading the essays. So this was question 3 on the AP exam in 2009. So everyone who scored question 3 looked at this exact rubric while they were scoring the responses. So for part A, I'm going to shrink that down just a little bit. For part A, okay, identify and then explain, identify and then explain, all right, the 2 factors of contributing to the decline. So on the rubric, it says one of those factors could be an increase. Let's see. Hello, I teach AP Engineering. Could you go over what each specific keyword means regarding how the scorers want the students to answer? Example, identify, etc. Yeah, we'll do that. So when we talk about all right, so yeah, that's a really good question. When we look at the word identify, they're looking for you to state what it is, okay? And then when you look at explain, they're looking for exactly that, an explanation. Now, the way I like to think about this is that these are 2 separate things that they're asking you to do, all right? When you explain something, you can't do that in a simple sentence or phrase. You have to connect it to what they're asking you to explain. So what I could do is, and to make this make sense, when you look at what it says for the factors and the identification, if you put increased milk production, that's the identification, okay? There's not a whole lot more to say. That's the ID. Here is the explanation. So notice that you get 1 point, a max of 2, because they're looking for 2 identifications. So if I said increase in milk production and also increase in mechanization, that's 2 points for the ID. Now, can I get those points without having the explanation? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Now it also would depend on what the rubric says. In this case here, then I'm saying, yeah, you can get a point for the ID without the explanation. The explanations usually come with examples. Correct. They absolutely do, Ms. Hutchins. Yes. So in this case, what you're looking at here is the explanation for the milk production, and they have to go together. Look. Scoring notes. Students must identify and then explain 2 factors. That is, link the decline of number of farms, the effect to the cause. So if you're going to say increased milk production is the identification, you have to use this explanation more or less for that. I mean, it can't be something else. So the explanation they're looking for here is cows produce higher yields. Yields is one of those vocab words, right? It means product. My handwriting is terrible, sorry. So yields means how much food it's going to produce. Cows are able to produce more milk in this case, meaning fewer cows are needed to meet the demand for milk. Therefore, there are fewer farms. So you have to make that connection in order to get the explanation points, right? Increased mechanization. You have to make the connection that mechanization and technological advances or changes the milking process to enable farmers to increase their dairy herds, right? This efficiency has made small farms unprofitable. So what do? They close up. If it's not a profit, they close up. That causes the decline. So you have to relate it to that, what the question is asking you in terms of how is it making the dairy farms decline. Now, the rubric's the exact same for part 2, except you're looking at the factors for why organic farms are on the rise. All right, and there's a lot of, man, there is a lot you can say here. Y'all see that? There's a lot of things you can explain having to do with that one identification or this one identification. Now, real quick, I just mentioned you can get a point for the ID without getting the point for the explanation. Can you get the point for the explanation without the point for the ID? The answer is yes. All right. And again, it's going to depend mainly on the question and on what they tell the readers at the reading. But I know usually if they've got it separated like this right here, all right, you can get a point for the explanation without the ID. You can get a point for the ID without the explanation. In this case, I don't really know how you would explain it without identifying it, but I know that on the question that I read last year, which was the one on the pop culture phrases, there was definitely the capacity to do that, to get to get explanation points. All right, so interesting. Yeah, I know, right? Let's take a look real quick at the at the question. All right. hey, welcome to the struggle, Miss Hutchins. It's I can tell you one thing. It's very fair. We're all on the same page for sure when we're doing it. All right, one with the rubric, but you definitely have to be one with the rubric. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. We already know that you've got your IDs. I wish I could show you guys the rubric and show you the question at the same time. But I've already looked at this ahead of time. And one thing I told y'all last week, and I'll restate it, is when it says identify, you want to clearly identify it so that it slaps them in the face. And then you want to explain it so that it slaps in the face. Don't make it hard for them. Don't write this one big old hodgepodge of a response that they have to dig for to find you points, because they're not going to want to do that. Notice that right here, I wrote out one factor. That's my first ID, is increased supply. All right, I'm going to use a different color because I want y'all to. This is actually something y'all can practice. You can do this. Look, I had people, when I was reading for the AP exam, I had people do this on their actual AP exam. They underlined where they felt like they were going to get points for the question. You know what? I could read it. I don't care. I'd say go ahead and do it. I thought it was a pretty good idea, to be honest. Another factor causing the decline, another factor, number 2 ID, causing the decline of dairy farms, that big farms are able to afford machines. Guess what? If I'm a reader, and right now I'm using the rubric, I'm a reader, I just gave me an ID for increased supply, and I gave ID for the machines, because if you look at the rubric here we just saw, you've got increased production of milk. I think that counts. I do. I wasn't at the reading for this, so I don't know what they would say, but I think that's pretty accurate. Supply and production, they go hand in hand. So I would give the point for that. Increased mechanization, that's exactly what I said whenever I mentioned that there's more machines. So I would say that this response is going to get a point for the 2 IDs regarding part A. Now the reader is looking for the explanation. So let's look at mechanization has enabled farms to produce more food efficiently, leading to a surplus. In turn, demand for milk has gone down. People are buying less and profits are low. Due to this, smaller dairy farms have gone out of business. All right, so we're looking at the, let's go back and look at our rubric. We're looking at increased milk production. Cows produce higher yields, meaning fewer cows are needed to meet the demands for milk. Let me tell my baby, night-night. Love you, sweetheart. Night-night, baby. Sleep tight. All right, so cows produce higher yields, meaning that fewer cows are needed to meet the demand for milk. Therefore, there are fewer farms. Let's see if that's kind of what I wrote in here. It may not be. I wrote that, let's see, mechanization has enabled, let's see, due to this, smaller farms have gone out of business. Larger farms are able to purchase machines that increase efficiency and therefore productivity. So the same, let's see, what does that say? So they save in the cost of production by investing in machines. Small farms struggle with buying machines needed to compete with bigger operations, and so they end up closing farms. All right, so I would definitely give me this right here is going to be an explanation point for for increased mechanization. Okay, and you can see that right there. That word is efficiency. What we're looking at is I didn't specifically mention increase the size of the herds through this. I feel like I was all over that response though. So I honestly I feel like I would get a point for the explanation here. In terms of the first one, let's see, cows produce higher yields, meaning fewer cows are needed to meet demand for milk. And therefore, there are fewer farms. I don't know if I got the explanation for that because I don't feel like my response that I put last week. I don't feel like I went into how the amount of cows are going to affect that. I looked almost immediately at the mechanization. So if y'all see this, it's like it made sense when I was writing it, but I feel like I missed a portion here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this question here would be, the first part A would be 3 out of the 4 points. All right, 3 out of 4. Because I'm just looking at the rubric. I don't think I got that exclamation point for the first factor. Okay, is 3 out of 4 pretty good? I think so. The point is, you don't need to make 8 points out of 8 points on this question in order to do well on the test. I can't tell you what the magic number is. You want to do as best as you possibly can, but you don't have to have a perfect score and know everything to do well. Question number 2. One factor leading to the increase of organic farming since 1970 is demand for foods that are not produced using chemicals and could harm people in the environment, as well as foods that are non-GMO. All right, so that's let's look at the rubric real quick. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I definitely said increased demand for, let's see, it says increased demand for organic products has made organic agriculture profitable and led to organic growth in organic farming. All right, so I feel like my ID was pretty good for that. All right, let's see, it's demand for, so I would underline demand for foods that are not produced using chemicals, or just in general demand. That's why organic farming is, right? So demand for that. Another factor is simply that people want to take better care of the environment with sustainable farming practice. We talked a lot about this last week in the lecture, which guide the organic movement. So the kind of the philosophy behind it having to do with sustainable farming practices. Let's see what the rubric says about that second one. Yep, sustainability is right here on this right here. So I'm addressing these two identifications right here. Okay, and I would feel like as a reader, I would give this response the ID for both of those. Now, the explanation is pretty detailed here, so I'm first going to look at where I put the explanation, and then we're going to take the time to look at how it will have scored on the rubric. I appreciate you guys staying with me. I told you we were going to go a little bit long today, and I'm telling you, you can't do this enough. I would recommend that look in your review manuals, look at the College Board website, find as many of these as you can, and walk yourself through these processes using the sample responses. I mean, you can't do this enough. Get your buddy, sit with a buddy, or maybe a group of 3. Each one of you answer an FRQ, and then y'all use a rubric to grade each other's response, just like we're doing right now. It's going to be one of the most helpful things you can possibly do, I promise. Okay, let's look at my explanation. Let's see. People have another factor is also people are wary of growth hormones and generally believe that crops and livestock have grown under more natural circumstances are healthier and more nutritious. I'm still going on with the ID as a student, and maybe I'm not sure if I hit it. Now, one thing you gotta keep in mind is that if you write something that is incorrect before you write something that's correct, the reader's gonna look at that and no, that's not always true either, though. Usually that's true. All right. So usually, if you identify something as incorrect as your first or second here in this example, you wouldn't get the point for it. But I know that in the past there's been exceptions to that. However, I also can tell you that if I wrote 2 things that are accurate and then wrote something that was wrong, you can't lose a point. From the reader will not go back and retract the point because you later put something that was complete crap. Okay. So keep that in mind. You don't want to just spam a bunch of stuff. That's not what I'm telling you to do, because In this case, if I put something incorrect before I put something correct for the ID, I would not get points. But the point I'm trying to make here is that right here, I continued to go on and talk about the ID because I wasn't 100% sure if I hit it. So people being wary of growth hormones and generally believe that crops and livestock grown under natural conditions are healthier and more nutritious. Therefore, organic farms have increased. Now I'm starting to answer the question. So organic farms have increased steadily to meet this demand, right? And actually, you know what? That was the explanation. So people have begun to look at, I think I might have skipped a line there. So people have begun to look at this at GMOs with skepticism. Also, people are aware of growth hormones and generally believe. So this here is where I'm looking at my explanation. People are afraid of GMOs. It might have health problems. All right, they're worried about things like growth hormones in cows and chickens and things that make crops grow under what they consider unnatural circumstances. So that's my explanation for the first factor. Let's take a look and see if I get the points. I'm feeling pretty good about that explanation, to be honest. So increasing demand, right? That was my factor. Consumers in the U.S. seek alternatives to industrial products of modern agriculture because of media-driven concerns about nutrition and healthfulness. I feel like that. Honestly, I feel like that's it right there. Let's look and see what else I could have said. Variable to afford, conspicuous consumption. Yeah, this here is my explanation. So I got the explanation point for that as well as the ID point. So let's look at the next one. So far I've got 3 points for part B. Therefore, organic farms have increased steadily to meet this demand. I connected it to the question. Organic agriculture is more than just eating foods that are non-GMO or not grown with herbicides. It is a movement which is centered on sustainable agriculture practice. So far I haven't got any points. I just restated my ID. So people who care about the environment or want to eat locally produced organic crops are willing to pay more for it. They feel like they are eating healthier while supporting sustainable agriculture practice. Many farms have sensed this and shifted environmental consciousness and have begun farming in places near markets or even cities. This, and then connecting the dots, this has led to a rise in the number of organic farms over the last several decades. This sentence here doesn't factor in to the points necessarily, but it's so important to connect what you're writing to what is being asked of you in the question. And you always want to make sure to do that so it's really clear and the reader can look at it and say, hey, I know this person knows what he's talking about. Let's look at the rubric and see if I got a point for that last one, which I feel pretty good about it. As stewards of the land, farmers, consumers wish to sustain it. That's a $20 word right there. In the same state they found it, rather than exhaust it or otherwise degrade it in the application of agricultural chemicals. That was kind of implied in my response. Consumers switch to organic products because they wish to eat foods that have a less negative impact on the environment. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That right there is my explanation point. So on this one right here, on this FRQ that we did last week together, it would have scored a 7 out of 8 points. Bam. So that took a little while because I was walking you through the process. But just to kind of really quickly summarize, when you're answering the question, you want to underline these ID words, okay? The ones that Ms. Hutchins was talking about. That's so important to understand what you're being asked to do. You want to know how much of it you need to do, how many examples you need. And you need to relate it back to what the question is asking you, which in this case is the decline of dairy farms or the increase in organic farms. Take the time to outline it if you need to, right? So you can jot down your answers and know how you're going to respond, and then write it out. And I'm not gonna lie, as a reader, I thought it was pretty cool when I saw students that underlined where they thought they earned the points, because that means that they have a strategy and they know what they know and they're trying their best to get the points, and they want me to be able to see where they got those. So organize your response. Lay out those factors first and get the ID points. Then later on, go in and explain it and take the time to just kind of lightly, if you want, underline where your response, where you think you're getting the points. Now, don't make it all like ridiculous so that the reader can't read it. But if I can read, I mean, the reader has to read it. If he can't read it, he's going to give it to someone else at the table until somebody there can read it. So the only way you're not going to get points for that is if it's completely marked out or illegible. if y'all have any other questions for me right now about this process, or if you think of one you want to come back next week and ask me, by all means, man, you can't get enough practice on this stuff. So let me know what your thoughts are, and we will definitely look into it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do some more of these as we get closer to the actual day of the test. So that's all I got for you. If you guys are done with me, then I'll let y'all get y'all's night. I'm gonna go tell my babies good night and get in bed myself. So I appreciate it. Thanks for sticking around. Have a good night. Thank you, Miss Hutchins, for being here with me. I know that's a lot of time for someone who has a noble profession. So thank you so much for being here.